Hi, I'm Teresa and welcome to my channel. Today I'm here with a very special guest. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah, I am Ciara Smith. I'm the author of The Falling in Love montage and coming up, Not My Problem. And I am so delighted to be here today. I'm so excited.
So happy to have you here.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to do a few questions with Ciara. As you know, if you've watched my channel, I'm a huge fan of her books. The Falling in Love montage is my favorite book of all time. So I am very excited to be doing this. And so I just want to start off by asking what your inspiration was for both of your books.
Well, I tend to start off with kind of writing a very quick concept. So, and then I kind of work backwards from there. So with The Falling in Love montage, it was something like, it was basically, that they would do this montage. There would be a romance based on the montage is of romantic comedies, and then I work back from there in a kind of character sense, being like, well, who would do that, and why would they do that, and why would it be so important to them, and why would they not just do something else instead? So it's really important to me that I suppose that characters' motivations really make sense and are really central to what the conflict is, because I think that if you sort of watch rom-coms, I think that some really great ones do this and it will make a lot of sense. And the one example that's kind of come to mind a lot recently is While You Were Sleeping. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I've not.
It's really old now, but it's a movie with Sandra Bullock where she sort of gets involved in a situation where it seems like she is the fiance of a person who's in a coma, and she gets really involved with their family, and it's kind of like, okay, well, if this was a worse movie, we wouldn't really know why she does that. It would just be misunderstandings and miscommunication. But the reason that she does it is because she's so lonely and her dad has died and she doesn't really have anyone. And so she gets taken in by this family and she just can't kind of give that up. And for me, that's what makes it so good, is that there's a really good reason why she's doing this. It's not just a silly mistake. And then for Not My Problem, it was the same. It was kind of just like, I just kind of thought, I try to think of what the fun part is first, what is the hooky part. So I was thinking, I think I'd not that long before probably watched Sex Education.
Oh yeah.
And I really like that idea of people just meddling in other people's lives, and it started off maybe as something a bit different where all of these favors that she did would go very badly wrong. But then I was like, but then why would people keep asking for help if she does it so badly? So it just sort of morphed into something else. And again, it was like, well, why would somebody do all of this? Like, what would be their motivation? Why wouldn't they just give up if it was hard and they're not really getting anything out of it? And so, yeah, so I sometimes see it as kind of reverse engineering the character, but the character is, and I think this is probably clear when you read my books, the character is the most important part for me.
It's so clear.
The plots are vehicles for the characters rather than the other way around, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. When I read your books, it's so clear that the characters are the main thing. That's a really strong point in the books as well. They're just so vividly alive and you understand all of their motivations so well. And yeah, it's just completely clear that, as you say, the plot is just there to propel the characters and their development.
Good. Well, I hope that's, I mean, some people might not like that, I'm sure, but that's where I come from, and so I'm glad that comes across that way.
Yeah. So next I wanted to ask about something that I really liked in Not My Problem, which is the Irishness of it. So for those of you who haven't yet read Not My Problem, of course, it's not actually out, this book is just full of what I'm going to call irishisms, because I can't think of a better word. It's like different spellings and references and slang that's completely unique to Ireland. And it's such a big part of the book and so naturally just in the text. And I really, really loved reading it. And I just wanted to know a bit about why you had chosen to do this.
Well, I think it's, I did it a bit in the Falling in Love montage, but sometimes I found myself trying to rein myself in a wee bit, or there would be things that came up that just didn't make sense internationally. And I'm lucky that both my editor in the UK and the US don't get any of these things, as in they're not from here, so they don't know them organically, and they'll be able to tell me if it makes sense in context or not. And they're really good about kind of, I think that they also want to keep those things in as much as possible, rather than kind of what I would see as watering it down too much. But I think it's important to me because there's not loads of books set in Ireland. There are some, by Irish authors. There are some, and the authors that we have are so amazing. They're so good. But there's still not loads of us. It's a small country, and there's and comparatively speaking, there isn't a lot of it. So when I was growing up, I did read actually a lot of Irish children's book authors. That would probably, aside from Judy Blume and the Babysitters Club, most of the kind of books that I read when I was young were by Irish authors like Siobhan Parkinson. And I remember reading Claire Hennessy's first book whenever she must have been about 13 when it came out, and I was like 13, and I was like I was like, what am I doing? I'm just going to school. I haven't even published a book yet. But I think that, so I was lucky in the sense that I never thought it was strange to have a book set in Ireland with characters who speak in the way that I spoke. But I think now with YA being so huge, sometimes those more regional voices can get drowned out a little bit. And that's, that goes for books in the UK as well. There are some books that are very clearly set in the place where they are, like and The Stars Were Burning Brightly, for example, is a very Northern England kind of way of speaking. And I really like reading other people's, not dialects exactly, but their natural rhythm of speech. And I guess that when I was writing, I was kind of thinking, well, why wouldn't I just write the way that that I speak, or the way that I certainly spoke when I was a teenager? So sometimes I think I did have to ask my younger. I have a goddaughter who is about, I think she's like 20 or 21 now, and I'd sometimes ask for her, do people still say this? So there might be things that have slipped in there that are like a bit old. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm gonna call that artistic license. I think it's okay.
Yeah. Honestly, I really liked reading this and having these very this natural way of speaking to the region, because in my region in Scotland, we obviously have all of our own things, and I've never read a book that's just had that. So this has felt like the closest I'd gotten to that, to having my own way of speaking in a book. So it was just very cool to read and to see that.
I think it's really underrated because, and I'm sure that I hope that there are people out there doing it now, if there isn't something already. It always brings to mind, though, train spotting.
Oh yeah.
Which is maybe like on the extreme end of writing in your natural style. But I remember reading that when I was at university and thinking, like, you could hear the person's accent. And sometimes people say that to me when they read my book. They'll say, especially people who know me, will say, oh, I can hear your accent, or I can hear your voice. And I'm like, well, that's great. I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, I think it's just, I don't even know how to describe it, but it just makes the book really, really special and unique, and just, I don't know, just centers it in its setting and its context so well. And I just thought it worked really, really well, and it's something I really liked reading and Not My Problem.
Thank you.
So yeah. The next one I wanted to ask was, what's your favorite scene from each of your novels? Of course, avoiding spoilers would Not My Problem if you can.
Well, this is probably a spoiler for the falling in love montage, just in case. Although I imagine if you're watching this video, you probably read it.
Yeah.
But my favorite scene in the falling in love montage is probably the scene where Saoirse does all of her her montage of grand gestures.
Oh yeah.
Near the end, and I think I love it so much because it was very visual to me in my head. Like when I was picturing it, I could see it, and I just thought it was really fun. So I love those sort of fun scenes to write, even though I am really drawn to writing, I suppose, more emotional and heavier topics, and sort of trying to balance that with comedy.
Yeah.
It's more fun to write those fun scenes. But also I always really loved writing any scenes between Oliver and Saoirse.
Oh yeah.
And their text messages and stuff. And I've said this a few times, but there was a few pages more of those. And I remember one of my editors just sort of being like, yeah, we could probably cut this. I think like, we get the idea. And I was like, all right, yeah, okay. It's not just a book of, exchanges between them talking, like giving out about movies, but I really loved writing those scenes, and they came really easily. And so I enjoy writing anything that's easy.
Yeah.
Not My Problem. I think one of my favorite scenes is a scene where the three sort of main characters, Maeve, Aideen, and Covey, are at a party, and they have to get changed, and they've got soaked from outside, and they are trapped in the bathroom because they don't have any clothes.
That's my favorite scene.
And I just love it because I think that it's like I'm just saying that I'm really funny. I think they're really funny together. And I really love their dynamic. I love the kind of brotherly, sisterly dynamic between Covey and Maeve and Aideen. But I love that, he's also basically just walked in on spoilers, some sexual tension, and he's just like, yeah, whatever. And they all just sort of sit in the bath together and kind of wait it out while their clothes dry. And I just kind of love that sense of their friendship kind of becoming more real, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that was so clear in that scene as this kind of like bonding moment, and I loved it so much. It's a scene that's really stuck with me from that book. I love the three of them together.
No, they're so cute.
Oh, love them. Next, I wanted to. This is one actually someone suggested when I asked for possible questions. Was, did either of your books have like fun working titles or previous titles?
Sadly not. So the Falling in Love montage was always called the Falling in Love montage from like before I even wrote anything, there isn't a big time gap between me deciding what to write and me starting. I don't do loads of pre-planning. I do a bit here and there, but like kind of like an overall arch, but not like, I do just tend to get started. So it was always called that from the beginning. Not My Problem had no name forever. It was just called Book 2, Book Harder. And Yeah, I just had no idea what to call it. And actually, it was my US editor, Stephanie, who suggested the name for it. And I really liked it. She had a bunch of different suggestions. It was something for me. I've written 2 other manuscripts that were not published, and I've never struggled to come up with a name except for this one. But I'm not precious. Someone else came up with a name. I was like, yeah, I like that. That's good, yeah.
Oh, I do like the names. I think that they work really well. Obviously, the Falling in Love montage is the perfect name for that book because that's just exactly what it is. But Not My Problem just works so well with Aideen and her character and everything that she's doing. I think they both work as perfect titles for the books. So props to your US editor for that one.
Yeah, it was good. So relieved then I didn't have to like rack my brains anymore. I was like, yes, no, that's perfect.
Next I wanted to ask, how much of yourself do you put into your characters?
It depends sort of, I guess, what you mean by how of my, like myself, in that I don't think I've in my published books I've never written anything that's actually happened to me verbatim. Like it's not nothing that's ever translated in that sense. I did once write a scene that happened from my real life almost exactly as it happened, as the opening scene to a manuscript that I wrote. And when I was querying it, one of the messages I got back was, this would never happen, this is not realistic. And I was like, but I think I put, I think I put my emotional truth into things, if that makes sense. It sounds really cheesy, my emotional truth, but that is what I mean. So I kind of see it as being a bit of like a method actor, I guess, in that if I'm writing a scene, something might not have happened to me, but I might have had that feeling, and that's what I'll try and channel. So while, for example, I don't have I never had a friend who did the things that Holly does to Aideen. I have had friendships that made you feel really bad. And so I know what that feels like. And that's kind of where I try. I think that's where I put bits of myself in. Or with Saoirse and Ruby, people always ask me, do I love rom-coms? And I kind of say that I'm both of them, because I both love and hate them. And so whatever I'm writing kind of Ruby's side of things, and what she loves about them, that's what I love about them. But when I'm writing Saoirse's side, that's what I hate about them. It was just me having a conversation with myself about, what I like and don't like. So I don't think you can write something and not put yourself into it in any way. Or if you do, I think it'll sound really empty, because if you've never had that feeling in some context in your life, then I don't think we're such great empathetic people that we can imagine to that extent. I think we can put things that have happened to us and put them in different contexts. Like, I felt like this, and it might feel like that if this different version of that happened. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I think it comes across very clearly that the emotions in your book come across very, very clearly, and it can be in other books that they come across hollowly, like if maybe the author's not felt that kind of feeling before. And it's a real skill to be able to put emotion on page like that and to make your characters feel it believably, and then to also have that have an effect on the reader as well. And I think you do it very well, and I'm not just sucking up. I feel like that's what I'm doing in this little interview.
No, not at all. It'd be weird if you were telling me how terrible I was.
Kira, your books are shit.
But I'm so glad that comes across, because I do think it's really hard, because when something is personal to you, or how you feel about it. You can write about it in a way that, yeah, when you read it, you're like, oh God, that really hits me because I know what that feels like. You never really know for sure if it's gonna hit other people in the same way, because how you experience something is not necessarily going to be how someone else does, or just how they even would describe it. And that's true for my things. You know, there are people who read it and just be like, why is this? I hate this. This is terrible. So, and that's fine. You know, that's okay, because not everything is for everybody. But I think one of the things about having your work out there and hearing from people who it really does, like, where they're saying, no, actually this really made a lot of sense to me, and this did feel like what I felt. That's really powerful, and it's really amazing to be able to get that, you know, be able to get that feedback, and especially almost in real time sometimes, you know, if somebody's like live tweeting your book or whatever, you just like, you can get in real time what they're experiencing, which obviously wouldn't have happened, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah, I do like live tweeting threads with seeing people react to books that you love, and
I love when people do those ones where they're like, oh, this is a bunch of books I like, but as cake. Or whatever it is, you know,
or something.
Yeah, I love those.
Fun. Next, I wanted to ask, if your books were adapted into films, what would be some kind of things you'd like to see, or people you'd like to see involved?
Well, I would really love my books to be films. Yeah, I really would. I would love that so much. I think it would be really hard to watch in some ways, kind of like watching yourself on film.
Yeah.
But I would really like it, and I personally am aggrieved that it hasn't happened yet. It's like, I'm sorry, I wrote a book about films. Why is it not a movie yet? I think it's perfect for a film.
Oh, completely.
I think not my problem. If anybody out there is listening, I think it's perfect for a TV series. But I think what I would like to see is just that. I don't have like actors in mind. I mean, when I was writing Not My Problem, there's an Irish actress called Shauna Kerslake, who I had sort of in my head, but not because she couldn't play Aideen, because she's the same age as me, but it's more just her presence, I suppose, that I pictured, and I would like to see, I suppose, people who are maybe new. I mean, you know, that this is something different, and you're not kind of looking at it being like, oh, that's so and so from something else. In an ideal world, I would like them to be Irish, in part because I think a realistic Irish accent is really hard to do, and so I wouldn't want to watch it and be like really distracted by somebody's terrible accent. But I'd like also, I think, if people make different types of media about, you know, based on a book or whatever, I like to see when they add things in, and I do like when they change things. I know some people really hate that. But they're very different mediums, and they lend themselves to different kinds of things. You know, whenever I write, I do kind of, I wouldn't say I see it in my head as a movie, because that sounds like it comes to me rather than I'm thinking it through. But I do try and picture the scenes, so how they go and what happens. And there are scenes, for example, in Not My Problem, where there were sometimes things that I wanted to write, but when I sat down to write this, so I'm talking about the favors, and in particular, I was thinking about one of the very early favors where they do like a break-in, and when I was writing that, I realized how and this is true for the Falling Into Montage as well, but how different you have to write things for it to come across well on paper, rather than a scene from a movie, because you can do things on screen that you can't do in writing because it involves too much explanation, and then it becomes just a boring scene describing action, and the physical comedy tends not to land and things like that. So I would like to see people, if somebody was going to do it, for them to put their own spin on it and use that medium the best way that they could.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think that both of them could be very, very easily put into film or TV or whatever. And like they just work with it so well. But I would love to see them like change different bits and add bits just to make it work as well as possible, because as much as people will always say I prefer the book to the movie and I don't like it when they change things, you've got to change things for a different medium.
Yeah, you
can't
have
avoid
to.
it.
Exactly. I think if you try and stick too closely to what happens in the books, it can sometimes fall a little flat, because writing things that are interesting is different from watching something that's interesting, and what's visual is not the same as what works on page all the time. But I always think of like one of my favorite ever adaptations is The Hunger Games.
Oh yeah.
And I love it because even though you don't get all of the stuff that's in the book, because you don't get everything that's going on in Katniss's head, the vibe of the movie is so in tune with the vibe of the book that it doesn't really matter if things are a bit different here or there, if they've changed bits or added bits in, because you feel like you're watching something that's related to the source material.
Yeah, Hunger Games is one of the best book to movie adaptations. It's
absolutely
so clear that they completely got the source material and knew what they were doing with it. Okay, a very easy or possibly very difficult question. What's your favorite book?
My favorite book of all time is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath.
Oh yeah.
I read it when I was about 13, and I just love it. I think it's so good, and that sounds really like really, that doesn't really sound very I don't know, coherent, or like it's really hard for me to talk about it coherently because I love it so much. But I have a quote from it as well. I have a tattoo that goes all the way up my arm, which is a quote, includes a quote from The Bell Jar, which is everything she said was like a secret voice speaking straight from my own bones. And I love that because she's talking in the book, she's talking about a friend that she's met, but for me that's what the book felt like. And what I think, you know, really good writing can do, or really good book can do, is that it can feel like somebody's saying something that you've thought but not said out loud before. And it's absolutely fantastic. It was written in like 1963, so there are parts of it that are a bit dated, of course. What I love about it as well is that it's very effortless to read. It's not a difficult book. You know, it would be considered like a classic or whatever, but it's not a difficult book to sort of trudge through. The writing is very fluid and very easy to read, and you would almost sort of read these amazing sentences but not see how much work has gone into it, because it is so easy to read it. And I really can't bear anything more than reading a book that's, you know, very well written but feels like a chore to get to the end of every page. I think there's a real skill in making things seem easy and not overloading your text with, you know, certainly not bogging it down with overly flowery language. other people feel very differently about this, and that is fine. It's just personal opinion. It's not an indictment on all sort of more elaborate writing.
Yeah, I think I'd be the same as you. Like, I can appreciate beautiful writing, but I don't want to spend that much time reading it and just getting bogged down in detail, and there's lots of long flowery descriptions and not a lot happening. Like, I do prefer to be able to read it quite easily without having to make an effort for it. So yeah, I think I'm gonna check out the Bell Jar then.
You should. Let me know what you think.
Convinced me. And just because a couple of people also wanted to know, what's your favorite sapphic book?
Ooh. Oh. I'm trying to think. Do you know when sometimes something people ask things and then you're like, I can't remember a book I've ever read now.
Yeah.
Can I come back to that if I think of something?
That's fine.
This is not to say there are no good sapphic books that I like. It's just I can't think of anything right now.
No, I know the feeling. If someone asks my favorite book, they either get a list or I forget every book I've ever read.
Or nothing,
no
yeah.
in between. So something else I find interesting in your books is that in both of them, the character's sexuality is so clear from the beginning. It's not a source of conflict or anything. Like, they're lesbians, that's it. And I was just kind of wondering why you choose to do this in your stories rather than making it maybe a coming out story or having it be a source of conflict.
Well, I suppose because I was probably I was very conflicted myself. I didn't come out until I was 26, and that includes to myself. So, you know, and it was a time, you know, when I was struggling with those things, it was a time that was very fraught and painful. And I don't think that it, you know, it has to be that way. I think that it is because of things, you know, it is because a little bit because of the world that we live in. But also I think that when I was growing up, I didn't read any books with gay characters that I can think of. And in fact, even though it's my favorite book, there's a line in the Bell Jar that where the character asks, why would two women want to be together? Like, I don't get it, essentially. And you know, and I think she says something like, you know, what can a woman get from another woman that she can't get from a man?
Yeah.
And again, it is my favorite book, but whenever I read that as a young person, and this is nothing to do with what the author is actually trying to say in the book, because that's separate. She's not trying to say that there is nothing. But when I was 13 and reading it, I didn't see the full context of what the author was saying. All I saw was this one sentence that was like, that made me feel bad, and I didn't really know why. But I didn't read any books that had gay characters. I didn't see any TV shows that did, or watch any movies. I didn't know anyone who was. So it just kind of seemed like something that didn't even really cross my mind as a thing that was an option, if you know what I mean. And so when I was sort of coming to terms with it later, it was very, very difficult. And I think I want to write about things the way I would like them to be instead, you know. And I think for some people today it is like that, where there is no issues, but I don't think that's maybe as common as the internet would have you believe. I think that it is still quite difficult. But if all you read is how hard it is, then you don't have a blueprint for anything else. Like, all you're going to see is this painful process, and it's important that people write about that. I just don't want to be the one who does it. I would rather write about what it could be like
Mhm.
once you've come through that process.
Yeah.
And that actually on the other side of that, there can be lots of joy and happiness and relationships and things that are good and empowering and positive in your life,
Mhm.
so that it doesn't look like it ends with that process, that actually it's what
Yeah.
happens after. That's what you want, that's what you're going for. And that's kind of, you know, that would have been inconceivable to me as a teenager. But I'd like to see it somewhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think as much as I love coming out stories and the ones that deal with more difficult subjects surrounding a character discovering their sexuality, books about just queer joy are is just as equally important, and showing what things can be and giving like readers hope and showing it's not all that bad. You know, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I think that's so important. So I'm just very glad that there's books that do that, such as yours, and so many others as well. It's just, I think that almost has like an equal importance to younger readers reading it and seeing themselves and seeing that it's worth whatever pain they may be going through right now to maybe get this goodness at the end. I can't think of a better word.
yeah, I mean, I hope so. Obviously, you know, for some people it's not an option for them to be out when they're that young. Sometimes you do need to be independent of family or your community for that to be possible. But I think that it would be nice to be able to see that there's a different way for things to be as well.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's just like hope for the future and what things could be, and I like that a lot. So I also just want to ask very quickly, what's next? Have you got any hopes, any hints for upcoming books or anything you're working on?
Well, actually, I've been taking a wee break from writing, because I think that I haven't spoken about this at all, but you know, I wrote these books during what were really, really difficult times for me. And it just sort of happened that the agent and the publishing deal and all of that sort of stuff happened at a time where a lot of other terrible things were happening. And I was also changing career. So when I started writing the Falling in Love montage, I had just started retraining as a social worker. And this year I've been doing that job during a pandemic. And it's just been really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I have been feeling a little bit burnt out. So I kind of said I'd take a little break and this year and just kind of come back to it when I feel a bit more energized, because I think that I was trying very hard to come up with something that I could do for book 3, and I was so lucky that, you know, there were people who were interested in seeing that. But I felt like whenever I was coming up with things that nothing was feeling particularly good to me at that time. And I thought, I don't want to write something. I think that if I write something in a really just to do it, just to write it, just to have book 3 out there, I don't think it'll be very good. So I'm just trying to take a little bit of a breather, and hopefully something will come to me this year when I feel a bit more relaxed and I feel a bit less pressure that is going to excite me and feel as good as these ones felt. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. And it's not worth, you know, forcing yourself to write something if you're not feeling it if you don't feel like you've got the energy and what you want to give to the book, because you won't enjoy it as much, and it'll probably come across, as you say, to readers. And yeah, as much as I
I
want
think
another
so.
book from you, I would rather wait until.
Well, you will get another one from me. I'm not spinning. I'm not done. I'm just I'm just on a wee break. But I suppose I hadn't really said it to anyone I knew, and hadn't really spoken about it publicly because it seems like a weird thing to announce.
Yeah.
I'm taking a break from work, like, you know, just but I do think that it's good to sort of point out that the last year has been difficult for everybody, and if you feel a bit drained and you don't feel like your most creative self, then that's okay.
Yeah, like this year's just been so difficult. Like, I am so in awe of people who still have creative energy, because I've not. And
and I think, you know, there's a pressure to kind of be at home and go, oh, well, you're at home now, so you could be doing so much more. And it's like, well, I mean, for one thing, I'm not, you know, I am, because of my job, I am out working and stuff, but also, you know, there's nothing particularly energizing about being at home and not being able to do things and go out. You know, I think it becomes very insular very quickly and can feel oppressive. So I think that if people are struggling with that, then, you know, that's so normal and understandable, and give yourself a break.
Yeah, you need a break. We all need a break, but yeah. So very excited for book 3, but happy to wait.
Thank you.
So the last question I want to ask has a major spoiler for the Falling in Love montage. So if you've not read it, bye. Please don't stick around if you don't want to be spoiled. Definitely pick up the book though, because you need to read it. Like, please. I don't know why you're here if you've not, honestly. It's incredible. You need to. But yes, please leave if you've not read it and you want to avoid being spoiled, because trust me, it's a big spoiler. And yes, okay. Hopefully no one is left here that hasn't read the book or doesn't mind being spoiled. So I want to ask about the ending of the Falling in Love montage and choosing not to have our main characters end up together, and why you chose to do this.
See, I love that I finally get to talk about this, because it's so frustrating to see people talk about this and not be able to like say anything, because I don't want to, like, some people have asked me about the ending, you know, on Twitter or something like that, and I've kind of been like, I've just ignored those messages. I hate ignored messages from people, because I don't want to do anything that boosts something that is a spoiler. I can't do that, you know. But yes, I'm very glad to talk about this, because a big part of it for me was, you know, and some people have sort of made the criticism that it can't be I don't know, can you hear my dog? Because
a bit, but you're fine. It's not
okay
loud.
He's fine as well. He's just being grumpy because he's been left out of this. But yes, so a big part of it for me was like this sense that first of all, not all rom-coms have that happy ending. And I know that some people feel that doesn't makes it not a rom-com anymore. But I would say to those people, you don't get to decide that. Unilaterally, you don't get to decide that. I think one of my favorite rom-coms is My Best Friend's Wedding, which ends up with the main character alone. And if you're going to tell me that one of Julia Roberts' most famous vehicles is not a rom-com, then we don't really have anything to say. We're just going to fundamentally disagree then. But I think it's important that a romantic comedy has a hopeful ending. You know, that it's not depressing at the end, that it's not it doesn't say that it says something hopeful about life and about the future for the characters. But I think from the outset, I very clearly set out that Saoirse and Ruby will end their relationship, and they have very good reasons for doing so. And I totally get that people want them to be together at the end. Like, you should want them to be together at the end.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you know, then they weren't a very good couple. But for me, you know, it's not realistic. And it's not that everything has to be realistic. It certainly doesn't. But I felt like I would be going back on the point of the book if they ended up together. You know, the point of the book is kind of to say that, you know, something doesn't have to last forever for it to be very meaningful and to be important to you. And sometimes things can't last for reasons that are beyond your control. And you see that that's what happens with Saoirse's dad and her mum. And they can't, there's, you know, Saoirse and Ruby are so young. So in my mind, I'm kind of like, right, well, what are the options for them being together? One is that Saoirse moves to England and then leaves her mum, who doesn't have a lot of years left, and to go over there to do something that she doesn't really particularly want to do, just so that she can be with Ruby. I feel like that would be a terrible message. Or Ruby could move to Ireland, but she has her family and her obligations that she's trying to support them with, and that she does willingly. So would it be better for her to leave her family and just so that she can go out with someone that she's known for 3 months? I like the way that for me, it sounds like I'm so angry, but just I've never got to talk about it. But I like the way that, you know, they leave it on good terms, and they kind of make a decision that I think is very healthy, in that they won't, they're not going to stay too enmeshed and too much in contact, because I think that can, while it's very tempting at the time, like as they both sort of say, you know, it'll only become more painful and drawn out that way. And that actually the best thing for them to do is to accept that they're not meant to be together right now. And if they are meant to be together, then there will be a right time for that as well. And I have, me and a friend of mine have outlined in what way they would get back together. So I'm gonna tell you what would happen, because there's no other place that I would be able to really say this, because it's not really relevant anywhere. But in my head, and I know that some people will be annoyed about this, they as they have said, they'll arrange to meet up in, 3 years or 5 years or something like that. They don't go. They think about it, but they both sort of think, no, she's not going to be there, you know, and this is silly. This was a summer romance that we had like several years ago. No, like, we'll not do it. But they both think about it. But then 5 years after that, so 10 years from the end of the book, they both are single and attending Oliver's wedding.
Oh my God.
And then it's the right time for them, that they both are able to, that they're both sort of, you know, and weirdly in my head, I had it in my head that Ruby has just quit her job because she hates it. She's working for a production company that doesn't treat her right. She's like, I've quit my job. I'm gonna write my own film script or something like that. And so it's a good time for her to get out and move somewhere else. And so my idea was that they would both obviously be attending Oliver's wedding. So it's a chance for them both to be in the same place at the same time. And they're both really suspicious about whether the other one like went that time before or not, and they just kind of pretend it didn't happen until later in the evening. and they escape the wedding and all of the fairy lights out into the garden and have a chat about it, and that's when they rekindle the romance.
I love that. With the ending in the book, I could not see it ended any other way. Like, I think you had set out from the very, very beginning, this is going to end, and if you hadn't, it just, like, it wouldn't be committed to it. Like, there's some books that I love, and the author will say very early on something bad's going to happen at the end, and then they commit to it, and that's what makes the book good, because you're still kind of half expecting them to somehow work out a magical way around it. And I think that it's not as satisfying when you work out a way around it.
Yeah,
sometimes.
I think if there was nothing keeping them apart, then it wouldn't make sense as an ending. But there are things keeping them apart. Yeah. There's a reason why they've chosen this sort of short-term relationship. And it's not just because of Saoirse's hang-ups. That's a big part of why she chooses to go along with it. But, you know, there are other practical matters. And, you know, I think that there's something really wonderful about, you know, no matter what would happen in theory in the imaginary universe in the future, you know, they both have had this relationship that's helped them grow a great deal and understand different things and have different perspectives and have experience, you know, a really positive experience of a relationship, but also a really positive experience of managing conflict.
Yeah.
And that's something that they'll take with them in the future. And it would be weird if they were together when they were 17 and then stayed together forever. Like, that's, you know, I mean, it happens occasionally and that's lovely, but it's so unusual. And I like the idea of them both having different experiences and different kinds of relationships so that they have a more full life.
Yeah. I think as much as it's quite common to have this idea in a YA romance or rom-com that the characters get together and live happily ever after, it's not realistic or even maybe healthy, because you've got this experience of other relationships or other people. And I think that having a book that ends like this with them not together but still very happy, having grown and matured, is better but more realistic, and maybe giving a kind of different thing to young readers, to teenagers, on what to expect from a relationship and like what's realistic. And I don't know, it works so well with the book and the characters. You couldn't see it ending any other way, as much as it may hurt to have them not end up together. I did have a couple of questions like to ask you, like, I can't remember how they're worded, but like to do with all the pain you've caused readers through having them not end up together. And it's like,
yeah, I mean, some people, I had very mixed responses to it. Some people really like it and really understand it, and other people did want them to end up together. But I mean, not that they wanted them to end up together so much that they didn't like the ending, and that's you know, that's fine. That's okay. I'm all right with that. Like, for me, it's the only possible ending. And if it's not one that speaks to you, that's okay. But for me, nothing else makes sense for the characters. But it's funny when you were talking about, you know, that some authors will set out what's going to happen at the end, and you still hope that it won't. It kind of reminds me of reading They Both Die at the End.
Oh yeah, I've still not
read it. Oh my god,
honestly. I know how it ends.
I spent that whole book being like, no, it won't happen. It's like, no, it's the title of the book. Yes, it will. And that book hurt me.
I'm terrified to read it because it's
oh my god, it's so good though. You really should. I love that book. It's brilliant.
Yeah, that's the kind of book that was in my head at the same time, even though I've not read it, because I see so many people with the same reaction as you. Like, it's in the title of the book. I shouldn't be shocked that this is happening, but oh my god.
Exactly. No, it is, you kind of, you just yeah, you just want something different to happen, but that's okay. I think wanting it, like if you have that emotional reaction to something, I think that's really, that's good, because you know the characters want that too.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Just to, and it's obviously it's strong writing as well to be able to make you have these emotions and to make you hope for it and hope for something better and then to just crush it. It's impressive writing. If
But I
nothing.
didn't kill anyone, so at least
Yeah,
there's that.
you weren't quite as severe.
Yeah.
But no. Yeah. I think that the argument that for a book to be considered a romance or a rom-com that has to end with this happily ever after with the two characters, it's just, I don't know if it completely works, because like I can't call the falling in love montage anything else than a rom-com, even if they don't end up together. Like it's still a happy ending, it's not a sad ending.
I think so. I mean, obviously everybody's entitled to their opinion, but their opinions are wrong.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. Sort of.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was all the questions I had. Have you got anything else you wanted to talk about, or?
No, not at all. I think that was so much fun. I really enjoyed it, and it was such good questions and things that I haven't been able to talk about before. So it's been really good. Thank you so much.
No problem. I really enjoyed speaking to you as well, and finally getting an answer to that last question. I've been thinking about it since I read the book. So yeah, thank you for coming along and for chatting with me about this.
You're welcome.
Yeah. If you want to pre-order Not My Problem or buy the Falling in Love montage, I'll have affiliate links in my description if you want to support me. And just definitely do it. You can read my reviews in description, all of that as well. And yes, thank you for watching, for coming along. Thank you, Kira, for coming along as well. And yeah, see you in another video sometime soon.